All right, welcome to another podcast. And if you've listened to any of these podcasts, you know this to be true, that it's not because I am such an expert. My name is Jack, and I am not an adoption expert. This is my own personal support group. And so I've invited another friend in my own personal support group, my friend Steve Denny. Hey, Steve.
How are you, Jack?
We've been on this. He's been on before. And Steve, tell them a little bit about what you do.
Well, currently I am the executive director of Children's Heritage Foundation. We are a development organization working predominantly in Uganda and Haiti, working with orphanages and schools and a whole bunch of kids and families, just trying to help kids grow up in what we hope to be the best way possible.
How many orphanages do you think you've been in? Just you have to ballpark that.
I mean, I've probably personally been inside what I would say 40 or 50 different orphanages in 3 different countries, maybe 4 different countries.
Yeah, so what we want to talk about today is there are people in this process of adopting who will get a child from one of these kinds of orphanages. Now, they're all different. Steve's been at 40 or 50. He's much more of an expert. I've been at several myself in Uganda and Haiti. So it might not look exactly like the orphanage that your kid came from, but there are some things about these orphanages that kind of remain the same. And what our hope is that by looking at what these orphanages look like, you'll get a better picture of what your kid has gone through and what they look like. Yeah. So, Steve, why don't you start with just some basic? Well, you've adopted a couple kids, right? So let's give it a little personal.
Yeah.
Tell me about your kids.
I've got 2 kids that we adopted, and then we also have 1 kid that was biological. So they're now 16, 13, and 3 with a lot of bias. I say they're the 3 best kids in the world, but I know my bias is strong.
So great. Well, you guys were never really intending to have a bio kid, right?
We were not. The bio kid was certainly a surprise, but a huge blessing. So all my kids are blessings. The 2 older kids are both adopted from Uganda. People always ask, are they biologically related? They are not.
Yes, if you see a picture of the Denny family, you will not have that question. So, okay, so you've been doing this work with Children's Heritage Foundation for years and years and years. You for your job, you're going to all of these places. Yep. Give us a picture. Paint a picture of what an orphanage looks like.
Yeah. Well, let me first say that there are a lot of good orphanages. I think in our minds, automatically, when we hear the word orphanage, we think negative thoughts, that there's just things that aren't good going on. And I've seen some really good orphanages, beautiful, well-maintained, clean, folded clothes, happy kids. But there's a lot of bad orphanages too. So there's a broad spectrum when we use the word orphanages of what's going on. But as you said, there's also some real common, every orphanage I've been to has been crowded. I've never seen an orphanage that wasn't crowded, like lots and lots of kids. And so the adult to kid ratio isn't real great. At the nicest orphanage I've ever been to, up in northern Uganda, it was feeding time for the babies. And the house mom sat down on the floor and had 8 heads, so 8 babies with their heads on her legs with bottles all at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
So 8 to 1, all these kids under 1 years old.
At the best.
That was at the best place I've ever seen.
At the best place, yeah. Right. And I remember going to Haiti, and there's a couple of different orphanages, and it feels like kids have free reign.
Yeah, chaos seems to reign through most orphanages, right? I often wonder if things might change when I show up, and if that isn't how it is all the time. But I also then think about my family of 3 kids, and if there was no adults around, it would probably be chaos all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk for a second. That's what it looks like as far as the adult to kid ratio. And you can just kind of imagine what that looks like as far as, kids being able to do whatever they want, discipline,
Yeah, discipline.
But why don't you paint a picture? We talked a little bit about what discipline can look like in an orphanage.
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 extreme opposites in orphanages that I've seen, and I think you've seen as well. One would be that there's just none. Like kids can just do what they want and they get away with what they want until they work it out on their own. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the discipline can be really extreme. And probably the most common form of discipline I've seen is some form of physical spanking. In Africa, they call it caning with a stick, and other places it's more like a spanking. But closely connected to that is shaming. And so when there's 100 kids in one small orphanage and one kid misbehaves, he will get spanked, but they'll call kids together. They'll publicly spank them and then describe what they did and why and shame that kid. So a lot of kids growing up in orphanages grow with a sense of guilt and shame within them.
Right, right. Okay. Let's talk for a second about the, just food in an orphanage. What does it do to a kid? I mean, generally speaking, there's probably not enough.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, there's not enough of anything. Most orphanages, I think all orphanages I've ever been to have been under-resourced with everything. So when you think about food and you relate it to your own family and your own home, the first thing to keep in mind is that kids in an orphanage, at least none that I've ever seen, have had access to food when they've wanted it.
Okay.
So they don't have what we call refrigerator privileges.
Right.
Right? They are given food when the workers are prepared to serve them food.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be the...
And how many meals a day?
Well, I think in the best orphanages I've seen 2 or 3 meals a day. I've seen other orphanages where they get like a snack and then one mediocre meal a day.
Sure. Yeah.
And then if that meal's at 3 and you're hungry at 8, but you have no refrigerator privileges, you don't eat. Like, you wait till the next day.
Right,
Yeah.
right. One of the things that we'll do when we go in, because we've been from our church, we've been to Haiti 30, 40 times, is what we will do is a massive meal for these kids to celebrate us being together. Oh, there's just such a joy to those moments.
Yeah, there's something really valuable about a shared meal, right?
Right.
Now, some orphanages I've seen where kids actually do sit together and share a meal around a table. Other places I've been, you're just hoping to get a plate of food and eat it somewhere with somebody or by yourself. But I think through the stories of the Bible, but through the stories of my own upbringing and now my own family, that a shared meal around a table is really formative in my own life and I think in the life of kids as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that was interesting when we were in Haiti, one of my buddies, Nick, we call him Saint Nick, he witnessed that all of these kids were eating on the ground.
Right.
They're just sitting in the dirt, eating on the ground.
Yep.
And that's just generally what happened. And so we came down with the idea that we're going to build picnic tables so that they at least have a place where they're up off of the ground to eat.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, kids are eating on the ground.
Yeah. There's, when you're under-resourced, then survival is your number one go-to. And so you hope to get food.
Right.
So if you get food, you've met that survival requirement. Anything after that, a plate, a bowl, a utensil, a table, that's all extra to survival.
Yeah, right. So here's a funny story. When we got our daughter, she loved certain things. It was just like odd. I can't believe you really like this. She begged us for powdered milk because, and not like give us powdered milk and mix it up and that's what we'll drink because that's what we drank in the orphanage. No, it's the actual powder. And she would eat it with a spoon
Right.
because that was like this delicacy where she was from.
Right.
Which to me said, look, you're going to eat whatever is put in front of you. However you can find nutrients, that's how you're going to find it.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be the same thing almost every single day.
Right.
Right. And so most places I've been, they might have a weekly diet or a daily, but it's not every, at home right now with my family, like every day we decide what should we have tonight, and it's always different, right?
Right.
I know orphanages where they do eat the exact same thing every day, all year long. So,
wow. And give me an example. What does that look like?
Overseas, the carbohydrates are highly, they're easy, they're accessible. So starches, a lot of potatoes, rice, that sort of thing. Not a lot of vegetables, not a lot of fruit, not a lot of protein.
Right.
So you get some sort of flour or corn-based meal with beans, likely,
right.
and then some level of protein additional to beans. Like, so one orphanage in Haiti, they eat meat, a small helping of meat once a week, and that's as much meat as they get, and then usually half of a hard-boiled egg once a week as well. So I remember when my son 10 years ago came into our home into America from Uganda, he grew up in a place where he ate the same thing every single day. And he didn't have access to food unless it was served. And so every single morning for weeks and weeks, he would take food from his breakfast. He'd eat half and then wrap the rest of it up in a some form of paper or napkin or something, and then put it in his pocket for later that day when he might get hungry. And then he would then also want to eat the same thing when he moved
Right.
home for weeks. He did not
Right.
branch out and eat new food. He picked two things, and he ate the same things every day for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It's crazy behavior, right? Because we think, wow, man, they're going to get here
Right.
and we're going to give them choice and they're going to be so excited.
Yeah.
And it's so scary for them.
I mean, you say it's so scary for them, and all I can do is imagine it must be so scary for them to be
Right.
like. It's hard to understand this. It's hard to relate to this. It's hard to get this. But yeah, the power of choice and never having it is so foreign to receive it at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old for the first time. And then as an adoptive parent, you think it's like the biggest blessing you can put upon your kid to give them like these opportunities and these choices. And I just think it's scary and overwhelming.
Yeah. So our daughter comes home, and we had my daughter and her husband fly in to greet them, and it was really an amazing moment. She actually came down the ramp. I don't know, were you there?
I was there.
You were there, and there's 40 people chanting her name, which also probably freaked her out. And
Right.
she just got on an airplane, which freaked her out. But she was hungry when she got home. So Tyler, my son-in-law, made her a panini,
Yeah.
just a couple pieces of bread, some meat, some cheese, boom. Well, that was called a Tyler sandwich, and that was the only thing that she would have for breakfast every day.
Yeah.
Always the same. Ham and cheese, bread, panini, every single day. You go up to her room. What would you like? Tyler sandwich. Would you like pancakes? No, Tyler sandwich. Would you like French toast? No, Tyler sandwich. Every single day. And it was so odd to us.
Yeah. But it's also so important, like as an adoptive parent, to like realize that it's odd to us, but it's like you're trying to normalize this experience to them and make it like more comfortable and safer for a child coming over, especially if they're 8, 9, 10 years old, where if they've been doing the same thing every day for 5 or 6 years, that, hey, let's help them by saying, you want the Tyler sandwich every day? That's awesome. I'm going to keep making you the best Tyler sandwiches every day, rather than trying to beg them to make a choice for something different.
Right.
So,
Right. And one of the things that she would do is she would want rice and beans, but she wanted it the way it was made in her family.
Yeah.
And she would try to create it and concoct it and what have you. And there was a longing for that.
yeah, we rarely talk about the loss of an adoptive child. Like they've lost everything known to them when they leave their home country and come to a new home in America. And so that longing for their rice and beans cooked in the way it was back at home is something we need to honor and do our best we can. I think I can assure you that over a relatively short period of time, that will go away. My kids now want nothing to do with the meal they ate every single day for 6 years.
Right, right. But back then, you could put a filet mignon with a baked potato on one plate and rice and beans on the other, and she'd pick the rice and beans. You go, you've got to be crazy.
Yeah.
Try this. Trust me.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's not really, I mean, it is a matter of trust. There is
is.
trust, and there's
Right.
huge trust issues. But what we've learned is the amount of change that they've had to go through to create some consistency, to create some, dynamics that where she knows what to expect, and the amount of things in her life are small.
Yeah.
So, Steve, I'm a pastor of a church, as you know, and I was giving a message on how our God lavishes on us. And I was saying, I can't wait for this girl to come home so I can just lavish on her. And I looked up Oreo cookies and the different kinds of Oreo cookies. I don't know if you guys have been, like whatever your store is, it's not just, Oreos anymore. There's golden Oreos. I mean, there's
It
peanut
takes up
butter
an entire
Oreos.
aisle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's amazing. But you have no idea. I looked it up. In fact, I ordered a lot of these on Amazon from my church to sample after this message. Okay, you ready? Hot and spicy cinnamon Oreos.
That sounds disgusting.
Salted caramel Oreo thins. Birthday cake Oreos. Chocolate hazelnut. Red velvet. Peanut butter. Caramel apple. Lemon twist. Blueberry pie. Banana split Oreos. Candy corn Oreos. That just sounds... That's the loser to me
That's
so
the
far.
loser so far. Yeah. And
Jelly donut. Oh, how about this one? Seriously, I got these They were disgusting. Swedish fish Oreos.
Yeah, Swedish fish are gross. So why would you infect a good Oreo with that?
Exactly. Limeade, root beer float, creamsicle, waffles, and syrup. You go on Amazon, buy any of these. And I thought, how great. I'm going to bring my daughter into America. We're going to go to the Oreo aisle, and she's just going to love that she has all of these choices.
Yeah. So we're talking about like understanding your child, right?
Right.
You think about an 8 or 9-year-old child that is living in an orphanage that may have not very often ever left the walls of that compound. So
Right.
A bulk of their existence might be within 1 acre,
Right.
right? And no choice almost ever about food or clothes. You take what's given to you, and we're thankful for orphanages around the world that at least do that.
Right.
But then you take them out of that and then put them on an Oreo aisle. You're not just talking Oreos, you're talking about a grocery store with an
Right.
abundance of food that people are freely grabbing off the shelves. And how overwhelming that might be just to see it visually, but then to ask that child to then also make a choice. I mean, that is overwhelming. I remember when my son, he was 8, no, he was 6, sorry. He was 6, came over. We flew, just getting on an airplane was overwhelming. The number of people, just the drive from the orphanage to the airport was overwhelming. And we landed in Amsterdam, and his world just exploded into like new experiences. And the number of people and the different colored skin that he'd never seen, and there's so many things. But one of the strongest memories I had was, he needed to go to the bathroom, and he didn't speak a word of English, so I had learned a couple phrases like, I need to go to the bathroom. So I at least knew that.
Sure.
We walk into this bathroom in the Amsterdam airport, and it's all hands-free. Now, my son at 6 years old had never been exposed to a toilet, had never been exposed to running water. And now he's warm running water that you don't have to touch anything for it to activate, and a hands-free dryer and a hands-free flush. He washed his hands like 15 times. My wife actually came into the men's bathroom to check if we were okay because it was so overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you put that into that power of choice. We talked about this earlier, Jack, but the movie Instant Family, I just highly recommend it, partly for its helpful nature of foster, adopt, and all the changes kids go through, but also it's lighthearted, and they bring in enough humor that you don't just have a meltdown and cry. And
Right.
I mean, you do cry. I watched it on the plane recently, and the stewardess came up asking what I want for dinner, and I was crying, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No," but I got over it. But there's a scene in that movie where the oldest of the 3 kids being adopted comes into the house for the first time, and it's exactly what you're describing. She's overwhelmed by the abundance. She assumes the family's rich. They show her to her brand new room in this new house, and then they just start pouring on her. Do you want to paint? Do you want to decorate? What color do you want to paint? Pick a color. And they're talking fast, and she's just like taken back, like doesn't know what to do. And so she just picks black.
Right.
And they paint this brand new, beautiful room, this beautiful solid black. And they're like, so then the mom and dad are standing there going, "We love it," and trying to like support and encourage her decision. But it captures exactly what we're talking about right now with the overwhelming sense of abundance and choice and option that just would not be normal for any kid ever growing up in any orphanage I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's crazy. We actually have not intentionally not watched that movie because we are in the throes. We're 2 years into this adoption process of having our little girl home with us, and there's a lot of things that are going great, but we did not need the extra drama. So I will take your advice and I will watch that movie. I was thinking about the first time we got her together. It was like the week before we're going to leave and go home. The elevator, getting on the elevator.
Yeah.
And it was her and this other older boy, Gilbert. You know Gilbert. He's 28 years old or something right now. Neither one of them had ever been on an elevator before.
Right.
And when that started moving, they kind of rushed to the center and they had this panicked look on their face. It's just one thing of how many things.
Yeah.
And what has ended up looking like for us with our daughter is she has a very small, defined amount of things that she will do. She will go to school. She's comfortable with school. That's one of the things that you and I talked about when we brought her over.
Yeah.
Get her in school right away because...
Yeah, because school, in the life of an orphanage, school is everything. Education is so valuable, and so most orphanages are also schools. So they will stay there and go to school, and other places take them off to school. But in most countries around the world, school's long. It's all day. It's a big chunk of their day, and it's where there's lots of kids. So it is the one thing kids will know when they come into your home is other kids in school.
Yeah, we didn't wait. I mean, it was
Yeah.
within the week, I
Yeah.
think, that we got her in school because it's the one thing that she was comfortable with.
Right.
She can do school. She likes 2 or 3 television shows. Now, I'm telling you, man, this drove me crazy because she wanted to watch this Argentinian Disney Channel show called Violetta. And Violetta they're all 45 minutes long. And it's like a kid's soap opera. But the exact same thing happens every show. And this girl likes that boy. This boy talks to that girl, but they're just being nice. But she thinks she gets jealous. I mean, every episode is killing me, man. Can we watch? Because I've always wanted her to watch Disney Channel shows and Disney movies and all these great things. My mind was thinking, I want to expand her view of life. And she wanted to watch Violetta. Now, here's the downside. Violetta is 3 seasons. Do you know how many episodes in each season? 80.
Oh.
80. There were 240 45-minute Violettas that we had to work our way through. It was brutal. But it was same.
Yeah.
Right? And so Violetta was on Netflix. It's not anymore. So then it was Liv and Maddie. And we watched it every season 5 times.
Yeah.
And I've kind of got her on a couple new shows. But when it's, hey, do you want to watch a movie? Helping her choose a movie is almost impossible. We have to kind of really push her to try something new, and she kind of likes it. But it's that same feeling of, this is new. So movies are hard. She works out, which is a great thing. But there are literally 4 things that she likes.
Yeah.
I'll throw on top of that the mall. She loves the mall.
My 13-year-old adopted daughter also likes the mall, but every time we go, we leave rather quickly because even now, I mean, she's been in our home for 6 years, and the mall represents an exceptional amount of options and choice to her, and is still like you have to pick a store, and then you have to pick stuff within that store.
Right.
So she loves to shop, but she'll usually say, like, can I go to Old Navy and pick one store to at least like reduce the
Right.
number of choices? And Jack, I sometimes, because since we also have now a 3-year-old biological child, we're watching some stuff with our biological child. She gets on Netflix. She wants to watch the same show on Netflix every day. And I sometimes think, okay, this is sort of like my 8-year-old adopted son who all he wanted to watch was the movie Cars every single day. And so maybe, again, this is not my level, my area of expertise in social science and psychology and brain development and human development, but maybe there's something about, like most kids in orphanages don't have TVs and movies and Netflix and Amazon Prime and those sorts of things, that they're 8, but it's kind of like a 2-year-old exposure to this. And so the repetition and to see the same thing over and to see something familiar, there might be something there for young kids. To this day, my 2 older kids, they're 16 and 13, still watch movies that are well below what most of their friends are now watching because I just feel like they're catching up still with lots of things. And so
Yeah, I'm sure anybody who's looked into orphanage, and adopting knows this stat. I'm not even sure what the exact stat is, but for every year you're in an orphanage, you only develop either 1/3 or 2/3. So you're like a third behind always.
Right.
And so you look at a 14-year-old, well, they're really like an 8-year-old.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And the other thing, too, that I'll throw out there is one of the reasons why we have learned why she doesn't like movies. Like the first movie we took her to was Moana. How are you going to not get Moana? But her language skills weren't good enough.
Yeah.
So about an hour in, she put her head in her hands and said, "Oh, this is so long," because she felt stupid.
Yeah.
She felt like she didn't get it. And we've learned that even when we do watch a new movie, she'll ask questions, we'll stop it, we'll roll it back, we'll talk about it again so that she can get it. And she'll watch the same movie over and over and over again, and each time she'll enjoy it more. But really, it's change, but it's also, I don't get it.
Right. Yeah, and this could get really complicated, right? Because I know for my kids, were coming from East Africa, there was a lot of witchcraft and spiritual things that any talk about death in any movie or any show then conjured up this idea of a ghost and the presence of the spiritual world and the ghost. And so they were terrified for several years. And so I think partly what we're talking about now is sort of the art and the dance of parenting, whether it's a biological kid or an adopted kid. Like you need to cultivate an awareness of what's going on in your kid's life and what's appropriate. And what we're trying to encourage now is that there's probably things from your child's past that you're unaware of that we want to alert you to and help you think about, and probably also for you to dig into a little bit to help you understand how to, like, don't force them to eat a new food right away or to watch multiple movies because there's just things.
For me, it's just adjusting my expectations.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I can honestly get frustrated because the choice doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
Like,
why wouldn't you want to go to
choose that?
Disneyland? Like, it's the...
Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to eat this? Why wouldn't you want to watch this?
Right.
I could, in my mind, I'm thinking, I could show you so many more wonderful things than the show. But the truth is that Violetta played on the television set in her orphanage, and she would watch it with her friends. It was something that held her back, that connected her to her growing up.
The other thing is,
I'll also say this. Your kids were afraid of all the scary things. My daughter begged me to watch Child's Play and Chucky.
we still have not watched that.
Exactly. No. Crazy.
There's a sense, Jack, that kids growing up in an orphanage are not longing to leave their country to come to America to play. They want a mom and a dad and a family, right? And so what you're lavishing on them is your relationship as a mom and dad, not like they're not dreaming about stuff. They're dreaming about a family. And
right. And that's true. When we'll go to these different places, we'll go to Haiti, you'll notice that these kids have giant smiles on their face and they have nothing.
Yeah.
They're not putting down their Game Boy to come hang out with you. They just have a smile on their face. Right. And what we as Americans come away with going, wow, how is it that you can be so happy with so little? But what they're happy about is that the relationship.
Exactly.
They're happy with the person that just showed up. And that's kind of what you committed your life to with, Children's Heritage.
Yep. Right. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the effects that some of these things have on our kids now. We talked a little bit about how the lack of food affects our kids here. You talked a little bit about hoarding. One of the things that we had to figure out, and we have a counselor that we've worked through some of this stuff with, and they really challenge us to not make food a battleground.
Right. Yep.
Because food you want to sit down, eat what's in front of you. Our daughter has a bunch of attachment issues, which has turned into control issues, and food is very much a place of control.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of had to lay off, and it's been weird, man, because we had this, she came in, we just thought that she was trim. She was malnourished,
right.
And it was very obvious.
Right.
Well, then she had we didn't really set any weight goal. But had we set it, she would have shot well past it.
Right.
Because she gained 40 pounds.
Yep.
And then she decided that she wanted to be healthier. So she started eating right. And she's now back to a really great, healthy weight. But there's just some crazy things that happen with food.
Yeah. I mean, again, like there's professionals that work in this area of food and like eating disorders.
And we're not those people.
But that's what we're talking about is if you make food the issue, that has the tendency to lead or could lead towards some sort of eating disorder. So we want to be very careful about that. People will eat when they're hungry, right? My 3-year-old is that way. We don't force my 3-year-old to eat her dinner. She almost comes back every night an hour later. I'm hungry. Can I eat now? Sure. My son, when he first came, he ate a Costco hot dog every single day because he only wanted hot dogs, and they were the cheapest ones I could find. Like that's all. But is the diet of hot dogs the best diet? No, but we slowly introduced some things, and he would refuse them, and then he'd finally find what he liked, and we would keep introducing them until we found. Because you have to remember, these kids only ate what was presented to them, and it was frequently the exact same thing, and in lots of orphanages, fairly bland.
Right.
And so now you're going to introduce like America's staple, like spaghetti or something with cheese, and cheese is gross to people that have never had cheese. And spaghetti sauce, even the most mild sauce, is spicy to kids that have only had bland food. And so we don't want to make food an issue. If we let my son hoard, or like we're not going to fight over any of this stuff. My 13-year-old daughter is much like your daughter. She was very malnourished when she came, but had a wide palate. She loved lots of different types of food, but now she loves to eat. And now she's trying to diet, but she doesn't know about a healthy diet.
Right.
And so doesn't know how to put one together. And so we're just slowly walking through it with her to say, what's an appropriate diet, a healthy diet, not a weight loss diet, but a healthy diet for a 13-year-old girl. And just
Here's what was interesting for us, because Daphne came in and she wanted to cook for us because she would sometimes help in the kitchen, and she would make these things that we viewed as very disgusting.
right.
Right? But I think we sort of learned to be able to dive in and try what she was making,
Yep.
so that we could kind of model that behavior
Yeah,
for
that's
us.
so good, right?
Yeah, because it becomes very much, and you're not intending this, we're right, the way we eat is right, and the way you eat is wrong.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think what we're trying to do is develop this understanding to not make food a battleground, especially if you have a kid with attachment issues. And we'll talk about that on another podcast. But you have a kid with attachment issues, control becomes very important to them.
Yeah.
If you get in a battle for food, they're going to try to control that. And that's when you talk about eating disorders and all those things, which are very dangerous.
Yeah, and we need to just lay aside the assumption that everything about our home is better than what they had in the orphanage.
Right.
And if that's the assumption that you have, that everything's better and you want to replace, then you're replacing everything about their life. So if she wants to eat rice and beans because that's something from her past, that's fine. And
Right.
so my
Yep.
my kid wanted to sleep on the floor. He never had a bed. Like,
Okay, talk into this. Kids go in an orphanage from very little adult oversight to now having two parents, and we're thinking about rules and obedience. As you know, they used to not have anybody to hug them or fix up their scraped knee, but now they got mom and dad, and they're into everything.
Yeah, and we tend to overparent in that situation. So with my son, my wife and I, we didn't. Our son that we adopted was our first child, right? So he was 6. He was in an orphanage where his class, when he was 5 years old, his school class had 100 kids in it, Jack, and one teacher. No teacher's aides, one teacher, one adult with 100 4- and 5-year-olds. The room that he slept in had 60 kids and one adult for 3 rooms. So one adult for 100 to 120 kids, right? So what he knew was exceptional independence.
Right.
If he wanted to walk out of class and go to the bathroom or go play, no one even noticed. When he woke up, when he went to bed, it was just tremendous independence and very, very little oversight. So a lot of peer relationship, very little, like almost no adult to child relationship. And then he comes into our house, right? And then you got a mom and dad that have been processing this adoption for a little over a year, and dreaming about it and praying about it and how we're going to raise, thinking about new parenting models and all this stuff that we're just going to dump on him. And it was hard for all of us. We had to learn that sometimes he just wanted to get up and walk outside. Like that's what he was used to at 6 years old. And so we learned really quickly, like that rules and obedience are just going to go to like, what are the bare minimum for safety in our house? This is what we decided to do as a family, for better or worse. And tremendous freedom. I mean, my son had so much freedom in the early years because, and I say years, and I mean, like that's not an overstatement, because that's what he was used to for the first 6 years of his life. And so that's why school was so important, like putting him in school right away. We had problems. It wasn't his school. It wasn't his uniform, but we wanted him with other kids. So we started play groups and school and trying to get him around as many other kids as often as we could.
Yeah, you can just imagine. Think for a second. Going from a place with no rules to now you have to get up here, you have to brush your teeth here.
Yeah.
This is your rule. This is your chart, and you have to do these chores. And we've met, a lot of resistance to all of those things.
And like what you just said is really important, because when we're talking about rules, we're talking about get up and eat breakfast. We're not talking about like a hard,
right,
like that you have to do this chore, or you have to like say yes, mom, to mom, or no, dad, or no, thank you, or please. Like we're talking about let's get out of bed at this time and eat breakfast and go to the bathroom and brush our teeth. And it's just a rhythm as much as it is a rule. And then we're trying to impose that upon this kid as their parent as an act of a loving parent, right? Not as
Right.
a harsh ruler, but as a loving father to this new kid I've been praying and dreaming about for a long time. And it can be overwhelming. So,
Totally overwhelming and such resistance. And so what we have ended up doing was we created a chore chart. And at the end of that, because the one thing that she loves the most is the mall, but you can't go to the mall without any money.
Yeah.
So for every 20 checks, she gets $20 and then she can go do something.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
But it's all tied into, okay, if you unload the dishwasher or if you finish the end of the week without any zeros on your at school, then you get something, all of these positive behaviors that we want to see happen. But even then, it's hard to get them to that place of wanting to do any extra work. There are times when it feels like, what she doesn't want, she doesn't really want parents. She would like minions.
yeah.
That's probably a whole nother episode that we could talk about.
But I have 3 brothers, and growing up when we were all in elementary, middle school, maybe none of us wanted to do chores either.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
And so I know as a dad now, it took me through my second adoption to get to this point where I just decided I want to be a certain kind of dad, regardless of what I'm getting back from my child.
Right.
And so this is the kind of father I want to be, and so I do my best to be that kind of father. And
How do you think this makes a difference? They move from having literally hundreds of peers, maybe not quite hundreds, but at least 10, 20, 50 peers, to being an only child.
yeah.
What's the effect of that?
I mean, again, there's probably research and studies on that. I think from my experience, my son was just bored to death. I mean, it was, and not only that, there was a peer to like only child effect, but his orphanage was also somewhat rural on 4 acres of land. So he could run around on 4 acres of land, and there was cows and goats and chickens. And so it was somewhat rural and a big open expanse to run around on. And when we adopted him and brought him into our house, we were living in the city in a 1,000 square foot condo. And so he couldn't just run outside. It was downtown. So now it was like the peers are gone. Now it's a mom and dad, and my space just shrank. So there was a lot of changes for him that, we just had to navigate them all. And I think being aware of those things is just so valuable. Is what are the very specific changes, peers to no peers, rural to city, no adults to two like loving but overbearing parents, like inadvertently. But you will be that adopted mom and dad. I promise you will be that.
Here's what we got. We got a lot of I'm bored, and we got a lot of now what?
Yeah, exactly.
Now what?
Yeah.
Okay, now what? We do something. Okay, now what? And
Yeah.
it drove us crazy because we're not that kind of scheduled people. We had 3 other older bio kids, and they would kind of get to the place where they would know what the now what, or they could entertain themselves.
Yeah.
But our daughter couldn't seem to get to that place. She wanted to know, and it's probably has something to do with the schedule. She wants to know the schedule, and the more you can provide a common schedule, the more health they're going to have in that. But it was always now what, now what, now what, now what, now what.
Yeah, you think about an orphanage, even though as scarce as the resources are, most of them do have a schedule because it's a small number of adults trying to take care of a large number of kids. And so there might be huge gaps of time during the day where there is nothing planned, but they do know what's next. In 4 hours, it's dinner.
Right.
Tomorrow's movie day. They know what's coming. And so I think it's right, Jack, just to communicate to your kid, this is what we're doing later today. So they know.
Right.
But for my son, it was, we'd pick him up from school and go straight to the park because we learned right away he wanted to run around just like he did at home. For my daughter, she right away developed a love and fascination for reading. So for her, it was all about going to the library. And that's what she wanted to do after school and giving her space to look for books and read books. And
I found that in my daughter's schedule, it was watch a television show, Liv and Maddie, that drives me crazy. School, I can't go to. She likes going to the gym, but I don't have a gym membership there, and it's a whole thing. I can't get a gym membership there. I can't even go into it, but I can't go there because it's more like, a woman's thing. And then the other thing she likes to do is go to the mall. It drives me crazy. So what I ended up doing, we're an hour and a half from Disneyland. So for Christmas, My big present to myself was a Disneyland pass, and my big present to her was a Disneyland pass. And it's spendy.
Yep.
Costs us some money, but I get 8 hours with my daughter.
Yep.
And we figured out what it is that we can do to hang out with. And, okay, so we went once with a friend, and we had a good time. We went the second time, just us. And this was her comment to me on the way home. Well, that wasn't so bad.
And when you hear that, you internally celebrate.
I
right?
did. I did. This is what happens to you when you adopt. You accept those kind of compliments. And part of it was she never had a dad. And part of it is she was really more connected to my wife because my wife had been to Haiti 40 times.
Yep.
So we're slowly, but what you're saying is look for that way that you can connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And dive into that.
And whatever it is. And that's why it's so important to know what your child was in before, because it might be something like that, or if their experience was negative, they might be looking for something on the far end of the opposite experience. Like give me something totally different from my experience because it wasn't good.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
But you just have to kind of be aware of that. Well, I think we've kind of opened up some people's eyes to this. I just want to take it into this moment for a second, all right? Not everybody who's listening to this is spiritual God people,
Yeah.
but I think this will resonate with you wherever you're at, because this is one of the things that God calls us to. In fact, if you're an anti-Christian person, I think you're going to like this verse because you go, yeah, that's what they should be about. James 1:27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this. What is it, Steve? Is it rule following?
I don't think so.
Trying to be your best? Is it
No.
judging other people?
Pretty sure we might think it's that, but it's not that.
It's not that. You know what the answer is. Religion and our God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
Yeah.
Widows and orphans, and caring for those people that have less.
Yeah. That defines the majority world. If you live in America, widows, orphans, and those who have less is defined by the majority of the world outside of America. And I want to open up a little bit of a definition of orphan because the American definition, I think it is the American definition through our laws, define orphan in 3 different categories. And I think most of us, when we hear the word orphan, think no mom and dad, like mom and dad
Right.
have died, as this child is by themselves. Now, that is one of the 3. The second definition of orphan is total abandonment. So mom and dad could be alive, but are just gone. So they're out of the picture. And then the third definition of orphan, and this is probably one of the most common around the globe, is a single parent unable to care.
Right.
And that's oftentimes because, the dad bails. And so now you have like widow or single mom, if dad's still alive but gone. So you have single mom unable to care for a child. And now you're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in the world, a single mom unable to care for a child. And,
Well, that's the case in our adoption.
yeah, and mine too.
We actually stay connected to the mom, and we would go to Haiti, and she would say, every time, she said, bring my daughter with you. Bring her home with you.
Yeah.
Because she was unable to care in that way. She actually had 2 daughters, but one was too old. We couldn't take them both.
Yeah. So it's, regardless of your religious background or your view on most things, it's almost unthinkable to believe that caring for a vulnerable, helpless child isn't a good thing to do.
That's right.
Now, you can define caring for them in tangible ways in multiple ways. That does not mean you have to adopt one of these kids, right?
Correct.
There are so many ways. In America, you can adopt and you can foster. There's 2 ways, but there's so many other programs or even non-programmed ways to love and care for these vulnerable kids that our world would define as orphans.
And I would say to anybody, especially those people who have been to church for a very long time, just go to a place like Haiti, go to a place like Uganda. America World does trips all throughout the world. Children's Heritage does trips throughout the world. There's lots of organizations. And that had a lot of people say to me, well, you know what? I'm not going to Haiti because I haven't felt called to Haiti.
Right.
And I always say, well, you didn't feel called to Disney World either, but you went there.
Yeah.
And what will happen to your heart is that your heart will grow. You will see what God is doing. You'll feel the need to care for these people. And some of the care is going and serving.
Yep.
And some of the care is just, donating to something, or some of the care is feeding a homeless person or going down and working in a shelter.
Yep.
There are vulnerable people everywhere, and that's our call. If you are a Christian person, it's our call. If you're not a Christian person, you see inside of your heart that something comes alive when you do this.
Yeah, I've never had a person come with me overseas, Christian or non-Christian, not be moved to want to help some of these kids in some way, even if it's just for that 1 week or for some longer term way. Some people have since traveling with me have adopted. Some people have chosen to sponsor school fees just in some way because you see the need, and the need is so great. And the smallest amount of tangible help makes such a huge difference in kids' lives. We're not talking about a tremendous amount of money or really a tremendous amount of time, but it's some sort of tangible act really does make a huge difference.
What we found was when we would go, we came back. For one, we weren't the super Americans going to change them.
Right.
We learned as much from them as they did from us. But they became family.
Right.
And we have pictures of Haitian people on our mantelpiece, and we have metal art that they've created just for us.
Yeah.
We have this relationship that goes back and forth. So, there's just a lot of ways for us to serve and to make a difference.
Yeah, and to expand our view of family, right? To say, okay, that's not my biological kid. It's not even an adopted kid. I'm not even fostering that kid, but I'm looking at that kid as family, and I'm going to love them and care for them as family, whether they're in my home or whether they're 5,000 miles away overseas. And I think that's a beautiful view of family and how we are to care for widows and orphans, think of them as family.
So I think we got somewhere today. I think we need to keep this conversation going. We're going to get Steve back on the podcast really soon.
We're all learning, man. I sit here and talk like I got it. I wish you guys could all come over to my house this afternoon and watch how many times I'm going to blow it with all three of my kids. And it's a learning experience
that is
every
true.
day.
If anybody understands anything, if you learn one thing, that's the thing to learn. Well, hey, Steve, thanks for your help.
Yeah.
If you want any more information for Children's Heritage Foundation, you can find that at...
It is www.childrensheritagefoundation.org.
You can also look for more information about how you can help vulnerable children around the world on the America World Adoption website. Just jump in and do something. And I will say this, and I think you would agree with this. If you go, try to make a difference in the life of a vulnerable child, your life will forever be changed and forever be better.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I agree 100%.
All right, Steve. Thanks a bunch.
Right on. Thanks.